Hello, and welcome to Naked Zombie Chick, where we take you on a journey through the underground and into the unknown. I'm Stephanie and I'll be your host on this ride. If you haven't done so already, be sure that you hit that subscribe button and click on the bell icon so you can be notified when a new video is posted. Is Jason Voorhees a zombie? 2020 marks the 40-year anniversary of the horror classic Friday the 13th. There were other horror movies put out before, but this movie was pivotal in starting the modern slasher flick genre, with a new sequel coming out nearly every year during the 80s. And since this Friday is the 13th, today we are going to be discussing the silent slasher of Camp Crystal Lake. Jason Voorhees. Spoiler alert, he is a zombie. Let's start our discussion with a definition. A quick Google search defines zombie as a corpse that has been reanimated. Usually by witchcraft, but it could also be done by other methods. Even if the zombie doesn't eat flesh, it is alive from the dead, and that's the point. Now, according to the particular model of zombism, this reanimation can have any number of causes, which is significant because we really don't know what's going on with Jason. The original Friday 13th starts out in the year 1958 at Camp Crystal Lake, where the guests were all dying to have some fun in the summer sun. And it wasn't long before they were all just dying. As the story unfolds, we find out about Jason Voorhees, whose physical appearance made him the object of teasing among the other kids at the camp. But their laughter is soon silenced when Jason drowns in the lake, all while the counselors are too busy fornicating with one another to monitor the activity of the camp residents. And so that establishes Jason's death, but his body was never recovered. Flash forward to 1980 and we witness a killing spree perpetrated by none other than Jason's mother Pam, who appears to be so traumatized by her son's death that she's driven to seek vengeance on an entirely new group of counselors who have no clue as to Jason's death 22 years earlier. In the end, one of the counselors kills Pam Voorhees, beheading her in the process. There is a scene at the end of the original where an unaged Jason emerges from the lake and attempts to drown his mother's killer. Jason pulls the girl into the water, but then she wakes up and is assured by the local policeman that there was no other kid found, indicating that maybe she had hallucinated Jason's revenge.
So that brings us to the end of the original Friday the 13th. The 2009 reboot gave a variation of this story. Basically, Pam Voorhees is avenging the death of her son when she is beheaded by a would-be victim, just like in the original. Only here we see a pre-teenage Jason witness his mother's death and then sneak away with the machete she carried. Again, there's a bit of a psychological thing going on where Pam is killing people to avenge Jason's death. But then Jason comes back to avenge his mother's death. This was kinda glossed over by the reboot, where, even though it was said that Jason died and came back,
her son, Jason, he came back. He was actually there. He watched his mom being beheaded.
It was indicated that an orphan Jason grew up alone in the ruins of the deserted campground and was really a poor misanthrope who at an early age witnessed his mother's death, and not a supernatural automaton whose only drive was to kill. So far we've seen that Jason did in fact die prior to the first movie. I mean, he had to, or else his mother was just some deranged lady who imagined her son's death, and then sought revenge therefore, which is possible considering her often lapses into speaking as Jason himself.
Kill her, Mommy! Kill her! Don't let her get away, Mommy! Don't let her live! I won't, Jason. I won't.
Interesting scenario, but it doesn't explain young Jason in the lake. Unless he really was a hallucination brought on by the trauma of the events. But I'm going to say that Jason died as a youth and his vengeful mother was driven mad as a result. This explains young Jason who returned from his watery grave to avenge his mother's death. And sets up a narrative for the sequel where a grown Jason is now killing people. And what about his growth? By all accounts, Jason returned at the same age of life as when he died. This certainly does qualify him as a zombie, even though he's not eating anyone. But then Jason matures into a full-grown man prior to his own killing spree. We don't know how Jason returns. But that he did and does is well attested to. Later movies attempted to explain the cause of Jason's reanimation, but not his growth.
Everything from lightning strike to the psychic powers of another, to demonic activity, to his own will to kill, has been proffered as causative agents for reanimation. It would seem that whatever caused the reanimation also allowed the continued growth and apparently indestructibility of Jason's reanimated body. So whatever mechanism there was for reanimation, the established fact is that Jason did in fact drown to death prior to Pam's killing spree. He then returned to avenge his mother's death. 40 years, 12 movies, a few video games, and a comic series later, you and I get to discuss whether or not Jason is a zombie. What do you think? Leave a comment below. If you'd like to see more content, let me know what you're interested in. And if you haven't done so yet, click the subscribe button.